Hello and welcome to the One Medicine podcast from today's practitioner. In each episode, we share the expertise of a respected thought leader. Some you'll know and others you'll probably meet for the first time. We cover topics important to you, always with a focus on improving the health outcomes of the patients you treat while expanding your understanding of the many healing modalities being used today. Welcome to the One Medicine podcast. I'm your host, Rob Lutz, and with me today is Dr. Chris Meletis, ND. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Glad you could join the show. Chris is a well-known expert on the endocannabinoid system. You can find a few of his chapters on today's practitioner in the Endocannabinoid Resource Center. So thank you for sharing those. And I'll share links to the site with the endocannabinoid and some of those chapters that I mentioned, as well as a link to the book that Chris has put together. It's really, in my mind, kind of a textbook about the endocannabinoid system. Very thorough, well-written, and great references and so forth from your peers. Since there's so much information about the endocannabinoid system, so many directions that we could go in this conversation, and we have limited time, we've agreed to really just talk about CBD and its potential applications in clinical practice. Make this more practical for our audience who are medical professionals, and how to use CBD, how you use CBD, Chris, in your practice. And so before we get started, and I'll stop talking so much and let you really share your knowledge, I'll give you a quick bio for the audience on who is Chris. And then I've got a few questions I'd like to ask my guests during the course of the show, and we'll get to that, and then we'll jump into the topic. So Dr. Chris Meletis is an educator. He's a licensed naturopath, I should point out. He's an educator, international author, and lecturer. His personal mission is changing America's health one person at a time. Chris has authored 18 books and over 200 national scientific articles in journals, including Natural Health, Alternative Complementary Therapies, Townsend Letter for Doctors and Patients, Life Extension, Natural Pharmacy, NDNR, and several journal articles on PubMed. Chris served as the Dean of Naturopathic Medicine and Chief Medical Officer for 7 years for the National College of Naturopathic Medicine, now is called the National University of Natural Medicine. He was awarded the 2003 Physician of the Year by the American Association of Naturopathic Physicians. He has a deep passion for helping the underprivileged and spearheaded the creation of 16 free natural medicine healthcare clinics in the Portland metropolitan area of Oregon. And full disclosure, Chris is also, he serves as a consultant for TrueGen 3, who's the sponsor of the Endocannabinoid Resource Center on today's practitioner, and also for True Niagen. So, Chris, again, before we jump into the topic here, there are three questions I'd like to ask my guests. And first is, what do you call the type of medicine that you practice? And what would be three key attributes?
Well, that's an interesting and complex question. So, of course, I'm a naturopathic physician, so I practice naturopathic medicine. With the advent of functional medicine in that term, a lot of people are entering into truly the world of naturopathic medicine. And now we call it more globally and inclusively functional medicine. So we're not dividing ourselves by titles, but we're actually unifying more by philosophy. So I would say I'm a naturopathic physician with functional medicine focus. And really, what is functional medicine? It's working within the constructs of the human body, supporting it, and most of the time getting out of the way of what the body already wants to do to maintain homeostasis. So whether it be nutrition, botanical medicine, diet, lifestyle. And one of the things I mentioned to the larger audiences I speak to is I compare genetics and epigenetics as we have diet and we have lifestyle. And in between diet and lifestyle, there's some gaps. That's like the tiles on a kitchen counter or a bathroom floor. We fill that crack with supplements like grout, but they're called supplements and not substitutes. So we're working within the constructs of the human body, supporting it, and at the same time getting out of the way of the human body and its infinite wisdom.
Great, thank you. That's a great answer. So you're a naturopathic physician. What led you towards naturopathic medicine rather than becoming a conventional MD? Clearly, you probably could have done that as well if you wanted to.
Yeah, so interesting story on that one. It's a long one. I'll try to keep it brief. So I actually started my life. I went to Reed College, undergraduate, liberal arts, Ivy League school here in Oregon. And then my very Greek father, and if any of you have watched my Big Fat Greek Wedding, you know that it's a very dictatorial, hey, this is how it is. And indeed, most things are probably Greek rooted, if not Latin. But that's a whole nother conversation. For those out haven't watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding, if you watch it, you'll know what I'm talking about. So my dad came as an immigrant, just like my mom did, to the United States, met in the park blocks of Portland, Oregon. Voila, I came, and here I am. And so, but my dad said, you're going to become a doctor. And there was no question I had to become a doctor. It's just that's the structure of the Greek culture. Yeah, it's going to happen. So I actually said, well, okay, I'll become a doctor. And, you know, he said, well, you should. And my dad was very economically driven. You know, if you become this, you'll make this much money. If you make this, become this. So actually, I went and applied and got accepted to MD medical school, finished my first 2 years of basic sciences, and came back during the summer, ready to start doing hospital rotations, my third and fourth year clinical stuff. And my sister was dating this gentleman. And this gentleman said, oh, you had a class in nutrition, did you? And so, and he had, without a question, still to this day, has a lot more testosterone than I do. And so he double dared me. He said, unless you're just giving lip service to that class in nutrition in MD medical school, why aren't you becoming a naturopathic doctor? Kind of just like that.
Yeah.
And back in the day, this was 1990. He says, I said, what's a naturopathic doctor? I knew what chiropractic was, but I was a Kaiser Permanente kid. I was an HMO kid. And so all I knew was allopathic medicine. That's all I knew. And whatever was back from the Greek village, like eat this herb. But that was, you know, the Greek culture thing.
Yeah.
Because my dad would go to Greece every year. And it's like, okay. So I said, oh, you're talking about chiropractic? He said, no, I'm not. And he says, and he ripped open the telephone book with some bravado and testosterone and says, see two different addresses: Western States Chiropractic, National College of Naturopathic Medicine. And I'm going, okay. He said, but you're just giving lip service. Don't even bother waste my time. So he ends up going and into Oregon Health Science University local medical school. And I said, well, I'm going to go check it out. He double dared me. I had to take up the gauntlet.
Yeah.
I had to do it. And so lo and behold, I checked out the National College, which was at the time way out on the east side of town. And so, well, this is kind of interesting. This kind of speaks to the concept and the dilemma I had when I was in medical school. I actually ended up talking to the professor of nutrition, because once again, I'm a re-college graduate. I'm taught to expand and wonder and question everything. I says, can I just practice like natural intervention on biochemical pathways? Because in MD school, at the same time as taking nutrition, there's physiology class, biochemistry class, pharmacology class, and they're all talking about nicotinamide pathways and enzymes and this and that. And I said, that's what we're learning about with vitamin B3. And I'm going like, he said, yeah, if you want to lose your license. This was before Andrew Weil and Deepak Chopra and Dr. Oz, and you name the list of people that have now helped us all become more accepted and the concept more widely appreciated. And so I applied, I transferred in with advanced standing, became the Dean of Naturopathic Medicine in 1996. And shortly thereafter, the now ex-boyfriend becomes a student at the Naturopathic College. The bravado continued from there. But hey, it's like fun story. So I started in allopathic medicine. I appreciate all the science.
Of course.
And the beauty now is what? The science has proven what we've always believed in naturopathic medicine and functional medicine. It's like, wow, it's panning out. There is, once again, wisdom in nature.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think about some of the, traditional medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, and, those are things that have been practiced and used for thousands of years, right? And there was no multi-million-dollar marketing department, convincing everyone that it should be what you're taking. This is what worked. This is what helped the people become healthier and manage some disease.
Yeah.
So thanks for that story. And then the last question I have is, we talked about naturopathic medicine, integrative, conventional, functional. Is there a unifying principle you think that runs through all those types of modalities? Is there one thing that really kind of ties them all together?
I think applied observational empirical wisdom. You mentioned Chinese medicine. There's Ayurveda, of course, as well. And so there's all these aspects of the truth, even though people didn't know, they see and they observe. And one of the big problems we have, and lots of times my patients will ask this question, I think it captures your question, is, well, why didn't I see that? Because we're distracted in today's modern world. Indigenous people, and of course, with my Greek background, I'll mention Hippocrates. Hippocrates has been quoted as, well, food is your medicine, and may your medicine be your food, and all disease begins in the gut. Both of which are tenets which we can pretty much prove these days. Yeah. But if you think about it, he probably was wandering around Greece. He came home and he says, I feel terrible. The hot Mediterranean sun. So his significant other said, hey, would you like some food? Oh, this makes me feel better. this is medicine. And so, he got the quote. It was probably her that gave the idea. And the same thing, like my tummy hurts. And once again, when your tummy hurts, pretty miserable human being. So I think the concept is empirical observational medicine as demonstrated over the millennia. I think that's really where the medicine is at. And across the board, all fields, all aspects. And there's a truth in everything. And Lucretius, a Roman philosopher, said, truth begets truth. He was also the same one that was quoted, what is food for one is poison to the other.
True. Very true. Well, thank you for that. I love the answers to those questions. So we're going to jump in. We're going to talk about CBD, practical applications, how you use it in your practice. So I think that's where we're going to focus over the next 40 minutes or so. So I'm looking through, some of the questions you posed here for me to make sure we're asking, but talk to me a little bit of how you use CBD in your practice.
So about a decade ago, I started using CBD in my practice. Of course, the Farm Bill and making it legal and taking away some of the jurisdictional issues was helpful, because otherwise it was kind of thrown into overall cannabis sativa category, which of course at the federal level has still some questionable legal applications to it. So even though, of course, in clinical practice, it pans out quite well. So I started using CBD and I started doing the research into CBD, and I realized that we have an endocannabinoid system. Thanks to Mechoulam and the work out of Israel and some other places, the Czech Republic, also there's some parallel work that was being done. They have been doing work on THC, but realize like, wow, we have a system. It's called the endocannabinoid system. Some say cannabinoid system. And it's like, well, if we have this, well, what about the receptors? And what really caught my attention is when they started talking about how NSAIDs work and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, naproxen, and so forth. And we always say, well, it works on this mechanism. And one of the things I learned in the early 90s is applying a herb from a quasi-pharmaceutical perspective. It's just that quasi-pharmaceutical. There's a full array. And of course, in the THC world, we call it the entourage effect. Right. In the hemp world, they've adopted the term hemptourage effect to kind of allow that same concept. And so now it's like, how do NSAIDs really work? And when I started reading that NSAIDs, in part, particularly the cyclooxygenase, the COX meds, they actually inhibit FAAH, F-A-A-H. And FAAH within our body, an enzyme, actually breaks down anandamide. Of course, we know the word ananda in Sanskrit means bliss. So this is our bliss, our stress. So are we stressed out? Yes. My undergraduate thesis was on psychosocial stress and immunosuppression. So I was kind of already wired for that natural medicine thing even before I knew about natural medicine. And I'm going like, well, if that's an enzyme that's working, and we have this endocannabinoid system, we also have 2-AG and we have TRPV1 and 5-H1AA and all this in our body. It's like, well, if we have all these receptors for CBD, shouldn't we be using it? So that's how I started applying it. So I use it a lot for stress. I use it a lot for adrenals. I use it for inflammation. And I believe there is such a thing as an endocannabinoid tone and an endocannabinoid deficiency. So just like we could get tired of working out, and right before we started, you mentioned bicycling a lot and skiing and all of this. It takes energy. It takes biochemical pathways. And so if we have a biochemical pathway in our body, why aren't we using it? And it's the same thing when I graduated in 1990. We learned about berberine and golden seal, so Oregon grape, now known as Mahonia, and Berberis vulgaris. And it's like, okay, well, it works because it's antimicrobial. We kind of lose sight of the fact that it has PPR, the PPAR, the PAR pathways, and other pathways at which it works. So on the endocannabinoid side of things, why not support it? So I've been using it for stress, sleep, pain, inflammation, and also as part of an overall, and we'll probably talk more about this today, adrenal support.
Yeah, that is something I want to make sure we talk about is adrenal support. One thing I've heard about is there are other botanicals that support the endocannabinoid system, right? So like echinacea, is it the CB1 or CB2 receptor? So it seems like there are a lot of other plants that have a substance or a cannabinoid within them that would support that system as well. Is that true?
Well, correct. And just like in the world of the cannabis sativa or cannabis indica, there's a lot of terpenes. And a lot of plants have the same terpenes. And we're so linear and we're like plow horses down the field with our little blinders on. And I didn't finish my train of thought. And back in the 1990s, they said, well, St. John's works by hypericin. And there's a
Right.
big, you might remember this.
Yeah.
Well, St. John's wort might be as effective for mild to moderate depression as Prozac. And then that next year, there's a 42,000% increase on retail sales of St. John's wort.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, they backed away a little bit. They said, well, maybe it wasn't hypericin, maybe it was hyperforin. Like, no, we're trying to make everything into a little
reductionism,
category.
right? Trying to get it into almost like a pharma model. Yeah.
And yeah, like, no, I mean, if you think about St. John's wort and beautiful little flower, and if you ever find St. John's wort growing and you squeeze a little or not pink flowers, the little yellow flowers, it actually will stain your hands purple like blood.
Wow.
And so you have to think, that's kind of interesting. Imagine Hilda up in the Swiss Alps or Germanic Alps, and like, oh, so-and-so is very sad. Let me give her some little flowers. She nibbles on the little yellow flowers and plant. And she said, well, I'm not quite as unhappy. How did medicine get discovered?
Yeah.
And you and I started, before we started recording, about Lewis and Clark. I mean, indigenous people have been trying to be part of and communing with the land for a long time. And this is how.
So much more observant, right?
Much more observant and much less distracted. We're a very distracted society.
Yeah, I agree. So that's interesting. We will get back and talk more about the adrenal and how you're using CBD. I'm curious, do you ever combine CBD or hemp oil with any other botanicals, in your treatment with a patient?
Oh yeah. Well, when I'm doing something, once again, one shoe doesn't fit all. We've all came to our current state, however old we are biologically, chronologically. When our patients come to us, they come in their state of fixed and brokenness. And so we're looking to support various pathways. I'll add turmeric a lot. I'll do things like boswellia serrata. Sometimes I'll use systemic enzymes. So it's really trying to categorize things. And I have a dear family member, which has a lot of inflammation, has autoimmune Hashimoto's disease, but also has the gene called a PAI1 gene, which is life-threatening and causes life-threatening blood clots.
Wow.
And as the universe speaks, and I guess when we talk about functional medicine, we talk about mind, body, and spirit. So I was giving a lecture, my dear family member, which I was actually giving heparin injections for because they were within 24 hours of dying. They had a clot from their ankle to the popliteal fossa in the back of the knee, and then from the knee all the way into the groin, and about the size of a hot dog in terms of a blood clot you could palpate. So I ended up having another family member give the injections while we were stabilizing the clot. And so I give this lecture, and after giving this lecture down at A4M conference in Vegas, this was about 6 or 7 years ago, lots of people will ask you questions after you give a little talk. And there's one person just sat down while I was talking to another person and said, I'm just here to listen. And so I said, well, okay, after the person left, I said, so what do you do? He says, I'm a thrombotic specialist. Well, what's the likelihood that a thrombotic specialist would be sitting with me? And I was this close before I flew out of losing a dear family member. And I said, well, if you don't have any questions for me, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I had said, I have a family member, they have a clot. Do they smoke? No. Are they vegetarian? I said, yeah, actually, they are vegetarian. Are they on birth control? No. And the list goes on, and I answer the question. It says, they have a PAI1 4GG polymorphism. I'm like, what? Never heard of PI1. I know about MTHF, I know about other clotting factors. But once again, how the universe works in that separation of things. And so in that case of that particular patient, that person uses CBD along with ashwagandha and some other things, but they're using a systemic enzyme on a daily basis. So that would be different than a person that comes in and they just have a super high C-reactive protein, interleukin-6. Then I'm going to use more turmeric and essential fatty acids. So we all meet our patients where they're at. And it's what I call common thread prescribing. So there's going to be all these little tick boxes as we take our little history and hear how they got to where they are. There's like, okay, no, this person doesn't have the essential fatty acids. In the case of the blood clot person also, they're vegetarian, strict vegetarian, and they detest fish. The last time they ate fish was fish sticks when they were a little kid and they were forced to eat them.
So, and I'm curious, so do you think is there some kind of a synergy that happens that makes those other botanicals more effective with the patient because of the CBD, or are they just really kind of working separately? Is there any synergies that's happening there?
I think both. So like, let's look at capsaicin. Capsaicin, of course, cayenne. And so when I was 26 years old, I had herpes zoster, shingles, It would let a grown person cry, and I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's painful.
oh, it's very painful.
Yeah.
And so we know, well, we can apply capsaicin topically, and it will actually supposedly, back when I had it,
Mhm.
you know, 30, oh my goodness, did I say the word 30? 32 years ago, 33
Wow.
years ago. And you apply it, and they said, well, it depletes substance P. And substance P is, of course, for the pain side of things. Now we know that CBD also works the same way in part
Mhm.
that the capsaicin does. It works on a TRPV1. And so we thought all the way along, just like with NSAIDs, it works a certain way. Well, we thought cayenne only worked one way, substance P. No, it
Yeah.
also works on TRPV1. Well, so does the endocannabinoid. So that's a synergy on
Uh-huh.
CBD.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, I'll give an example of a patient of mine. She came in and she had rheumatoid arthritis, diagnosed. Autoimmunity ran rampant in the family, type 1 diabetic child. And her thenar area in between the thumb and the index finger was always swollen, always inflamed, and always painful. So we did SED rate, we did C-reactive protein, and they were always normal. She says, how can this be normal?
Yeah.
It wasn't until we looked at interleukin-6 through a normal chemistry and blood work through Quest Diagnostics, of course, LabCorp and other labs out there that does the same thing. And we said, oh, wow. So we need to actually use Stephania, and we need to use some Boswellia. We had to go for a different mechanism to tap the interleukin-6 pathway.
Yeah.
So we create the foundation, that we cater it to, much like building a house, the various rooms and applications for the structure of which we're working with.
Yeah. Really personalize it for that patient and solve their issue.
So I look for both synergy and autonomy of different approaches. And now humbling myself as I said that onto our current knowledge. So this is what CBD does. This is what turmeric does. This is what Boswellia does. This is what Stephania does that we know currently.
Yeah.
And later on, we're going to find, like with the echinacea, when we used to give echinacea for colds, that was the thing back in the 90s.
Yeah.
Echinacea golden seal, like who would ever have thought we were working on endocannabinoid system? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the key here is stay humble and realize whatever we know, we know. And we don't know a whole lot still.
Right. We're going to keep learning.
Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about terpenes. Okay. So you touched on it a few minutes ago, but so when you get the full plant, it's got CBD, it's got all these other things in there. What are the terpenes? What do they do? How do you look at those?
Yeah. So once again, terpenes also outside of the cannabis plant. There's just a lot of terpenes, and we see it a lot of times in essential oils, linalool and limonene and caryophyllene and all of this. And each of those individually have unique properties, and leafly.com will actually go through those. And so do I go through my book, which is free on your site. We look at the uniqueness of each application. And so it's bringing X to the functional medicine. The functional medicine meets the patient, but then so does the CBD. And in unison, there's a concert. And so I often give the example of a large orchestra. There's a string section, the brass section, the wind section, and of course the orchestra leader. In this case, the orchestra leader for our conversation is the endocannabinoid system. But then all these other things are coming to play in that little tink of the bell, or the triangle, or whatnot, or the xylophone adds the dimension to things. So I actually will go ahead and look at a full spectrum CBD whenever possible. Just like I rather use a whole plant extract of echinacea or turmeric or whatnot. There's benefits without a question. I mean, I've been on the scientific advisory board of a large company which has a specific liposomal turmeric with UCLA studied that crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it delivers so much free curcumin. There's a benefit there. Or when we go for like a pomegranate extract, and we're saying, okay, well, we need so much pinocollagen in order to be interactive with our microbiome of all things. So pinocollagen from pomegranate interacts with our gastric mucosa and microbiome to create urolithin A. So just like with the endocannabinoid system, our microbiome allows a plant to become in an active form. OMG.
Right.
Yeah, it's a whole nother conversation. That's my most recent book, was the MMM theory, which is microbial mucosal milieu theory, which is free on Kindle Unlimited on Amazon. And so it's free. I'm not pitching anything. And it's like, wow, well, what about all our little microbiomes? And now the endocannabinoid system and the microbiome there's something called the endocannabinoid ohm. And
Hmm.
the endocannabinoid ohm actually plays an integral role in maintaining not only an interaction between like lactobacillus and microbiome, but also that it actually creates a microenvironment for all of the cells in our body to work.
Wow.
And so we start looking at that like, okay, humbled again.
Yeah.
And as we move toward more and more towards AI and computer machine learning, it's like, okay, well, where will that lead us? But we still need to look at our plants around us, and whether we look at a forest and they've actually looked at forest bathing, for example, and now we look
Uh-huh.
at a plant. And if you and I were to go out in the forest, because we both, from our conversation, enjoy going outdoors and so forth, could we survive if there was no bottles of pills? Well, our ancestors did. So
Absolutely.
wherever your ancestral lineage is, and every listener, wherever
Yeah.
you're, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, everybody lived before there was the antibiotic. And I'm not picking on antibiotics, but
Sure.
we lived off the land and with the land. And so I think a full spectrum plant, whenever you're going to use a whole plant, and I give the example, if I offer you beta carotene, you say,
Mhm.
okay, well, beta carotene is an antioxidant. Hopefully it has some other carotenoids in it. But what would you rather have, a carrot or beta carotene pill? I have a feeling, Rob, you might say carrot,
Yeah. No, I know
unless you're allergic.
there are a couple studies. I think it was a red blood orange study, vitamin C absorption, compared to taking, let's say, 1,000 milligrams of a USP vitamin C.
Yes, yes, yes.
And because of all the other components, cofactors were in the orange, he had much higher levels of vitamin C after eating the orange as opposed to 1,000 milligrams, even though there wasn't 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C in that orange. The other example that someone shared with me years ago that I found interesting was talking about dandelion as a diuretic. And if you take kind of the standardized aspect of dandelion that was a diuretic, it depletes you of potassium. But if you take the full herb, it's high in potassium. So it's interesting how there's this kind of natural balance built into things that we don't understand. It's that whole mystery kind of thing that we've touched on a little bit here today. But I find those types of things very interesting.
Oh, and they're brilliant points. I'm glad you brought them up, because indeed, staying humble as we tout things. And that reminds me, when I was the dean at the Naturopathic University, I interacted a lot with the local MD medical school. And one of the 30-year residents in asthma allergy category, and it was an immunologist, 30-year resident. So, way along on their training. We had a big debate on what was the cause of asthma. And I said, well, there's a correlation with low magnesium levels and bronchospasm. And they said, no, there's not. It's all an inflammatory pathway. We were
Mhm.
both correct. And the person actually was big enough to come back later on and say, actually, I went into the research, and yeah, you're right. There is a magnesium component.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of functional medicine. If we all come and know that we are all humble, and we need
Right.
to go ahead and realize that every field of medicine brings something. Like,
Absolutely.
I don't practice Chinese medicine. And yes, I'm trained in 4 classes in Chinese medicine as part of my naturopathic program, because I was back in the day. And I'm trained in pharmacology, but I am not a pharmacist, and I'm not a big drug person. So if a person needs a lot of medication intervention, short term or long term, I'm going to send them off to an internist. That's all she or he
Yeah.
does in large part. And likewise, I refer to nutritionists, chiropractors, because everybody has a little spot in our field of functional medicine. Whoever's listening, if you're chiro, the research shows, and part of an NIH grant, which I was part of,
Hmm.
we were educating the 4th-year medical students and the medical school in general, in Oregon. And they said the neurological exam of the chiropractor was more thorough than a neurological exam of the neurologist, because you spent 4 years looking at
Right.
that infrastructure and infrastructure. It's like, wow. So once again, I just think keeping humble, and my hashtag is humane humans for humanity. And
Love
the
it.
more humane we are, and the more we're seeking humanity, but that's what defines us as human beings.
Yeah.
We're all in a collective together.
Absolutely. Well, I think, when I look at all these different modalities or types of medicine, their intention is to heal, right? And they take a slightly different view or how they're coming at it or what their specialty might be. But if we all take a step back and saying, we're here, you're in this profession to make people healthier. And that's why all your peers in these different modalities are doing the same thing, to be humble and say, hey, you know what? I think you should go see a chiropractor, or a pharmacist or whatever it might be,
Yes,
someone
yes.
who's more focused in that one area, you've discovered that they're going to benefit from that. And that's what I like about this integrative functional medicine space in general is they are humble and they want to heal the patient. And however we get there is how we get there.
Yeah, the patient wins, we win, team win.
Right. Yeah. So they spend a lot of time with their intake and really listening to the patient, and it's very patient focused, patient centric. All right, so we talked about terpenes. I know we want to talk about dosage and those types of things, but I think you touched on just in the beginning a little bit about adrenal health and your use of CBD. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Maybe talk about a patient, not using their name, of course, but talk to me a little bit about how you discovered that. This seems to be something that you've come up with, and what do you do?
Yeah, okay, well, certainly. And I'm sure a lot of our colleagues have figured this out too. And the reality is the concept of endocannabinoid deficiency proposed by Russo, as well as endocannabinoid tone. So if I work a hard life and I have, of course, as healthcare providers, we have and let alone functional medicine healthcare providers, we hear a lot of sad stories. We become part of the inner sanctum for our patients, and they share usually fairly freely. So we have all the angst that a counselor might hear often, along with seeing the functional aspects of their health either thriving, surviving, or not either of those two. And we're part of that journey. And so when we look at a cortisol level and we see the AM level, we look at the noon level, the evening level, the nighttime level, we see that gentle curve down, which then, of course, melatonin kicks up, and that's a sleep-wake cycle. But when we become worn out at the adrenal level, why would we not think we're wearing out other pathways? So just like we were talking about biochemistry and plants, well, what about the endocannabinoid system? Its receptors, it's driven, and a study on cosmonauts really took this home. So they looked at cosmonauts. So these are trained military folks, just like our astronauts are here in the United States. They're part of that structure of the military system. So they're gestalt. They've got their stuff together.
Right.
Because you can't lose your stuff up in space is what I've heard.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you could if you open the window and something might fly out, but that's a different kind of losing stuff. And so they found that the cosmonauts were just steady as one could go on the adrenal glands. They were controlled. They were composed. But their endocannabinoid system went wonky. It was the compensatory mechanism because they couldn't mind over matter the endocannabinoid system. They could mind over matter their adrenals. I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm collected. The endocannabinoid system is working in the background in a huge way as a compelling study. Like, wow, that was what led them to want to look at the endocannabinoid system. They clearly knew something which the average person didn't know.
Right.
And so what I will often do is I'll use things like ashwagandha and maca, rhodiola, or maybe something like schizandra or ginseng. There's a long list of adaptogens, or from an immunological perspective, maybe a straight list. But then I'm going to treat that patient at simultaneously supporting them with a little CBD, broad spectrum hemp product with the terpenes and everything, just to bring balance back to the endocannabinoid system. Lots of our times we'll have a patient and we're doing everything right. And if 5 of us on this podcast all went ahead and said, hey, well, what would you do differently? Well, I do exactly the same thing. It's like, but there's something missing. There's that challenging case, that resistant, recalcitrant case. And lo and behold, I have found that CBD, when added to an otherwise adaptogenic process, works beautifully to rise the ship. And I have a saying, which of course is not my saying, but all ships rise in the harbor with a high tide.
Right.
And so we just try to nurture the body and the tone. And there is such a thing, I truly believe, and I agree with Russo, endocannabinoid deficiency and a decreased endocannabinoid tone, just like we have a decreased adrenal tone.
That makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about dosage and, when should your patient be taking? So how do you look at that? Let's say this patient comes in and they're presenting whatever. Give me an example, and then how you work with them and test out the dosage, and where do you start?
So in functional medicine over the years, as I've spoken to, we've gone to quasi-pharmaceutical aspects of things. And some of the clinical trials on CBD used up to 600 milligrams of CBD for public speaking. But now you think about it, to get, and I've sat on multiple IRBs, institutional review boards, and Delphi panels. It's like, okay, we're going to propose an intervention. We're going to spend a lot of money and time going to that intervention. So we have to use a big enough dose that will move the needle.
Yeah.
So, and then it comes down to quality. So is that 600 milligrams of just CBD? How was it extracted? What's the bioavailability? What's the delivery mechanism? So there's all these things. So not all supplements, as we all know, the whole audience knows, not all supplements are created equal. And we've learned that the hard way. Patient says, oh, I've tried magnesium. So if we just took them on face value, I tried magnesium without asking, well, what kind of magnesium? Well, magnesium oxide. That's not very bioavailable. It's great for you're constipated. Or, well, I use magnesium citrate, taurate, aspartate in a blend. I titrated over the course of 3 weeks. And, well, that's a different answer than I tried magnesium. Well, so I'm not going to try magnesium. Magnesium doesn't work for that patient. Wrong answer. And we don't know that. And, of course, you can always test and not guess and, of course, quantify it with laboratory tests, which is another exciting part of functional medicine these days, with so many cool tests to kind of guide us accordingly. But then what I would say is on dosing, I like to go for a broad spectrum, but I want to make sure that the continuity of seed and plant to the manufacturing plant is in one continuous aspect, that it's tested before it goes into the plant for a GMP, and then making sure it's clean and it's free of everything, and then it's tested as a finished product. But now, thanks to some unique technology, one technology called Besisorb, it actually has been shown to increase the Cmax curve 4.4 fold. So you take this product compared to a normal CBD that's not, customized to be absorbed well, you get 4.4 times higher amount. So lower amount, better. But I truly believe nudging, not shoving. And so what I mean by that is we can take a large amounts of vitamin C, but do we need a large amount of vitamin C? Some people do, some people don't. Some people need a little magnesium, a little bit of B vitamins, but so often we just say, well, if more is better. Unfortunately, we're a westernized culture, supersize me, some of those fast food restaurants. Like, no, more is not always better. Our biochemistry at that cellular level is little millimoles here and there. And so as long as we're absorbing and assimilating it, do we really need to go over the top? And I give the silly example, and anybody that lives along a coast and grew up with an unadulterated childhood and got to play in the little tidal pools and so forth, there's something called sea anemones. And sea anemones have little tentacles, and they're usually either green or orange or pink. But if a little clownfish or whatever comes along, it'll kind of just tinkle. But if you squish that receptor, it closes down. And so often, just like when we do hormone replacement therapy, if we go too high, it's like, well, I was really doing well on my hormone replacement therapy and it stopped working. Did it stop working? Or that receptor say, what the heck's going on here? I'm closing down. You overwhelmed me. And I think that's where, on the recreational side of things, people overdo things. And that's where you get the hyperemesis. You end up in the hospital because you got this, and so strangely enough, why does the treatment for hyperemesis say either CBD in large doses or a hot shower? I mean, how does a hot shower help with hyperemesis and overdoing THC? The body is, once again, mysterious.
Right. Very true. So as far as dosage, you start low.
And start low, go slow.
Yeah.
And once again, see if it is sustainable. Plus, honestly, in today's world of high inflation, I won't say hyperinflation, that was another era, and hopefully we never reach there. But things are so expensive. If we can get the job done with a small dose. Now, I will say the time which I'm more cautious on the low dose, obviously, is antimicrobials, just because we don't want to have a drug resistance. I don't want to have an herbal resistance. So sometimes you have to go in there and just get it done. And at the same time, if a person is super anxious, I'm going to go start with a much higher dose. But once again, is it the 4.4 times higher bioavailability like with Besisorb? And once again, it's quality of the product you're using. If I'm using a simple tincture of echinacea opposed to an extract that has XYZ active constituents, I might do a higher dose. And in herbal medicine, often we underdose on, let's say, tinctures or glycerites. And we need to actually crank it up a little bit because we got the whole plant, but we don't have a whole lot of any single constituent. And we might be doing that quasi-pharmaceutical side of things.
Makes sense. That's great. So, and would you say a large percentage of your patients you'll integrate CBD into their treatment plan, or is it just maybe adrenal deficiency, or what are the types of cases where you look to CBD to be part of that treatment plan?
I would say about half of my adrenal patients, definitely insomnia. I'll add along with melatonin and maybe some essential oils to help them stay calm and chillax. And maybe some L-theanine. I am a huge fan of L-theanine because it helps with that sympathetic, parasympathetic, along with the alpha waves. And so I would say that sleep, anxiety, stress response, and just staying calm, cool, and collected. And also immunological and anti-inflammatory. Those are the big five. Immune. And there's a whole category of immune and its applications. And of course, the pharmaceutical companies like GW Pharmaceutical, of course, has gone into this unique seizure model as well, and that whole neurological pathway.
And that's a very, very high dose, right? To get
it's a pretty high dose. And so the key here is, once again, meeting the patient where they're at and creating, and I've learned this over the 32 years of practice, a sustainable wellness program that they can sustain for a long period of time.
Right. And it sounds like you also like to try to build up kind of that foundation for the patient. You know, it's not just, hey, you're going to take this high dose of CBD, it's going to solve everything for you. There's probably some underlying issues that you can help, you know, support in other ways. To me, that sounds like what you've been talking about a little bit.
Yeah. And from a philosophical perspective, decade ago in New York, I asked this question to the audience. I was lecturing on genetics and epigenetics. And I said, it was 7 o'clock in the morning, New York time. I'm a West Coaster, so it was like 4 o'clock my time, right? I says, and of course, I have this wonderful hairdo, aka bald. And I said, well, I woke up early to do my hair for y'all. You know, some extemporaneous speaking, warm up the 7 a.m. crowd. I says, it took a long time for you folks to get in here. Some of you are probably tired. I says, and I might be tired too. I flew in at 11 p.m. the night before. And I says, how many cells in my body have to be tired before I perceive tired? Is it 100 cells, 1,000 cells, 1,000,000 cells? I mean, because, you know, we're made of some 37 trillion cells plus. And I said, and is that adrenal? Is that brain? Is it? I says, I don't know the answer. How many cells in my body must be tired before I perceive tired? Let's imagine if a puppy woke us up at 2 a.m. How many cells in my body have to be tired before I perceive tired? And how sleep deprived do I have to be? And so nobody came up with the answer. I said, and I don't know the answer. So I'm starting this talk humble. I said, I'm going to lecture on genetics and epigenetics in a moment, and I know quite a bit about that under what we currently know. I said, let me ask you a simpler question. How many cells in my finger, and I held up my index finger, have to hurt before I perceive it hurts? And then I said, of course, I can take Tylenol, acetaminophen, I can take ibuprofen, I can put aspirin, white willow on it, I can take arnica, I can. I says, but have you ever had a big cut, like in a kitchen knife, like, well, there's a lot of blood, but it doesn't necessarily hurt. But then you get that little paper cut, and that's a dinner. So is it more cells, less cells, that for you to really have a finger that hurts? And then I says, well, could I just remove the splinter, and wouldn't that treat the cause? And always going back to the cause. How did that patient get there? And often it's a combination of things. They were stressed, they were in a challenging relationship, they're worried about their kids, they have loss, and they were born with a catechol methyltransferase gene polymorphism, or MTHF. So identifying what's made them susceptible, addressing the cause, and then slowly backing out of the ditch.
Love it. Let's see, is there anything else that we want to talk about here today regarding CBD? I think you'd mentioned you'd actually received a call from a colleague recently, maybe yesterday, that one of his patients was having a reaction to CBD.
Yeah, and actually, it was the colleague themselves, and so they know I write a lot and lecture a lot on this topic. And they said on a text, "Hi," kind of bashful. I said, "Hi," back, and I know this colleague well, and he says, "I had the worst," and so then they start unloading. I was dizzy. I was disassociative. I had just taken CBD that night because I was feeling stressed, and my heart was racing. And I'm saying, that's not CBD. CBD is a non-psychoactive. It has psychological benefits, but it's not going to be that euphoric thing. And when they're youth, they had done a lot of recreational items, so they knew what that was. I said, no. You had a lack of quality control product there. Clearly with some psychoactive, well below the 0.3% THC limit for a hemp CBD product. And once again, that shows the importance. Our patients count on us to vet what we're taking, and they picked up a random CBD and they took it, and clearly they had a psychoactive experience as though they were tripping hard. And no pun
Well,
intended.
I think you're right. I mean, I think with not just CBD, but
Yeah,
all the products, right? I mean,
all of them.
you talk to, like, I'll talk to my parents sometimes, like, well, yeah, this, fish oil, vitamin C, whatever was $5 at the pharmacy.
Oh, I hate
Why
that.
is this one so expensive? It's like, well, there's a reason why good products are more expensive, whether it's a supplement or anything else for that matter. But I do think that's why it's important for a patient, if you want them to, stay on the plan, the protocol you put together, use the products that you're prescribing. These are the ones that you trust, how they work, and you're more likely to get the outcome you're looking for if the patient follows your protocol and uses the products in most cases that you've recommended.
Lots of wisdom, lots of savvy there, because lots of times the patient's doing well, then all of a sudden they decide they're going to start shopping around the products and the protocol's not working. So, are you doing everything on the protocol? Yeah. I said, well, can you bring in all the bottles? I just want to review them. And we're like, well, yeah, I found that one at. I says, do you know that because I formulate for 14 different companies, so I have a good sense of what raw ingredients. I said, just the bottle, the label, and the capsules, whatever's in it, CoQ10 is more than $5 for 90 pills at 100 milligrams. I said,
Right.
so that's not financially feasible to actually deliver it. And so you're getting something other than, or somebody's feeling really benevolent and they're giving away basically free CoQ10. Probably not happening in today's world.
Not happening. Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's a very good point. Okay, so we did talk about delivery mechanisms, absorption, and things like that. You mentioned Vesisor, which I know when I was running alternative therapies, we published a study. I think it was their CoQ10 that used Vesisor and the absorption levels on that. So I think that's good to know. And of course, there are other good CBD products out there, but that's one that
Without a
use.
question.
Yeah,
There's great products out there, and the thing is, we've all found products that work in our practices.
Right.
And the thing that's most frustrating when a sales rep comes to us, like, well, I can switch out your products for you. Like, I know these work. I know the dosage necessary. And so I become very loyal. So as a result, in my standing pharmacy, I have some 25 different brands, a little of this, a little of that. And we find what works. And my philosophy is, I tell my patients, if I want to give it to my wife or my kids or my parents, it's not going to be in our pharmacy.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Well, great. So this was, I think, a great show. You've covered a lot of really amazing information for the audience here. Is there one kind of clinical pearl around this topic that you want this audience to walk away with? One thing you want them to think about regarding CBD or endocannabinoid system?
We have to realize that the human body, mind, body, and spirit is far more complex than we appreciate and are able to even grasp. And just like what we thought 100 years ago, we kind of had it all figured out. And that we need to just get back to the basics. And as functional medicine is being challenged to become more quasi-pharmaceutical, we just need to keep it to the basics: diet and lifestyle, and you supplement a good diet and lifestyle. And then mindfulness. In today's world, where we experienced all as a collective the COVID era, which I'm hoping is done, and it added an undue amount of stress and worry, forgetting whatever virus might have been floating around, but just the collective experience of isolation and fretfulness and the news feeds. And as a result, some of the health consequences we're seeing now and the mental health challenges are due to the fact that we're not connected. So the concept of what, God bless him, Stephen Sinatra lectured in Florida right before I did many years ago. And of course, he's passed now, but he was talking about earthing. And I was the next person on stage, but because it was a big stage, 1,000 people, we had to have the little Michael Jackson clear tube, maybe it's Janet Jackson, clear tube wired up. So I listened to his talk. And the next day, about maybe 100, 150, mostly medical doctors at A4M conference, they were out walking into Florida crabgrass because he talked about how the port isn't staying connected with the earth.
Yeah.
So I think staying grounded, immersing yourself in nature, and losing our technology as frequently as we can is probably one of the best gifts we can ever do.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think about lifestyle medicine. Your lifestyle is your medicine, and it's either going to be good medicine or bad medicine. So if you're doing all the right stuff, you eat well, you're getting outdoors, you're meditating, that's good medicine. And if you're eating processed food and watching your cell phone all day long and not connecting with your friends and family, that's bad medicine. And it will have an impact on your health in ways that can probably be measured, I'm sure. But
without question, leaving the cell phone away from the dinner table. And when you have human beings in front of you, there's no need for a cell phone unless you're on an emergency call.
Right.
You're with the person, communing with them. That attitude of gratitude, and we're all familiar with the term TGIF. Thank goodness it's Friday.
Yeah.
And the question is, and I live for the weekend. Those are all negative terms. No, how about Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? Those are also wonderfully splendid days.
Yeah.
Embrace each day that we're vertical, and knowing that as human beings, we can make other people's lives around us better or not. And by making happier humans, we have healthier humans.
Yeah, this is great. Well, Chris, really a pleasure having you on the show. Always love talking with you. And we'll absolutely get you back on the show. I know there's some other topics we want to cover in the future, but really enjoyed this one. And I'm sure our audience did as well. So thank you so much.
Hey, well, thank you for everything you do. You have helped our community and our profession and the world a lot. So thanks for all the hard work you do.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for listening to the One Medicine podcast. I hope you found today's episode interesting and came away with a few insights you can apply to your practice. If you're looking for the show notes, they can be found in the link below. If you want to go deeper on this topic or anything else, please visit todayspractitioner.com and consider registering for our weekly newsletter as well. Thanks again, and I hope you'll join us next time.